Bonjour à tous et bienvenue à cette leçon de cinéma ONF Sommets, la première en ces temps pandémiques de l'année 2021. Aujourd'hui, la discussion portera sur le projet La Grande Relance de l'animation anglaise de l'ONF et nous aurons donc le plaisir d'avoir une discussion animée par les productrices Maral Mohammadian et Jelena Popović. Hi, everyone. I hope that you can see me. My name is Marco 𝙏𝙚𝙚. Welcome to this Artist Talk NFB Summit, the first one of this pandemic year, 2021. Our talk today will be on the Big Reset project, and my friends and colleagues Maral Mohammadian and Jelena Popović will run the discussion with the filmmakers. Dear friends, it's your turn now.
Hi everyone, my name is Jelena Popović. I'm one of the animation producers at the English program Animation Studio at the NFB, together with my colleague Maral Mohammadian. Yeah, that's her waving there. And thank you, Marco. We're always super happy to have this partnership between the Sommets and the NFB that has gone already for several years, shed the light on the creative process for, of the films that we work on, sometimes kind of hidden. So having access to this behind the scenes and directors' points of view is always a great pleasure to take part in. So Maral and I have conceived this project, Big Reset, in response to the pandemic during the very early stages, March, April last year. And today we are 5 people representing the project, but in this event, but our remote team was actually made of 15, 16 people across the country working over 4 months. So today we are super happy to have 3 out of 4 directors with us. I'll let each one of them introduce themselves and tell us who they are and where they are and what's their professional background and career highlights. So I'll start with the missing one, Malcolm Sutherland. He unfortunately had to excuse himself from this event very last minute today because of an emergency on another animation chantier. So here he is, Malcolm Sutherland. He's a filmmaker. Well, his bio on his website says that his background is in cabinet making and traditional printmaking, and a degree in film from Concordia University. And of course, he's really well known by the animation community for films like Tourist and many others. And he's based in Montreal, but originally from Alberta. And he's directed the film called Worldviews that you will see later. Then I will give the mic to other filmmakers. Maybe we could start with Lillian Chan.
Hi, everyone. My name's Lillian. I did the film Cities for Big Reset. I've been in animation and filmmaking for over probably the last 10 to 15 years. I'm currently based in Toronto. But I did have a stint in Montreal working on my first professional film with the National Film Board and Michael Fukushima, who was my producer at the time, called Jamie Lowe Small and Shy. And I've continued having a working relationship with the NFB since then, working with other filmmakers and directors. And I currently freelance from Toronto doing filmmaking, animation, design, and I also teach animation at Seneca College. And I'm also currently doing a master's program in digital media. So that's where I'm sitting right now in the middle of COVID. Nice to meet you all.
Too.
𝙏𝙧𝙖𝙣?
Yeah.
Thank you, Lillian.
Sure. My name is 𝙧𝙚𝙀𝙚 Anderson. I'm based in Toronto. Been here most of my life. I'm the director of governance. I had the great pleasure of working on that as my first animated film this past summer. I started my career as a comic book writer-artist. Was best known for many years for writing and drawing a biography of Martin Luther King. Kind of a warts and all look at his life, his highs and his lows. Around 2003, I kind of pivoted away from doing graphic novels and got into journalism. And I was a reporter at the Toronto Star for a number of years. But the big passion was always filmmaking. So around 2009, 2010, made yet another shift. Took my visual storytelling skills that I'd learned doing comic books and applied that to filmmaking. Started making short films on my own with my partner, and then went to a place called the Toronto Film School and then to Sheridan College to study filmmaking. And I've been involved in kind of both worlds for the last last several years. So randomly got an email one day from Maral and Jelena saying, "Are you interested in exploring animation?" To my credit, I said yes. One of the best films I've ever made. And here we are.
Thank you. And then Phil.
Hi, I'm Phil Eddolls. I'm the director of economics portion of this film series. I'm located in Toronto, like a lot of other people. And what else? I'm mostly interested in stop motion animation. I've been doing it for since about 1998. My first film would be with the NFB in 2008. I'm interested in humor, and I run a commercial animation stop motion studio called Stop Motion Department out of Toronto. And we sort of closed down, put ourselves into hiatus for COVID, and I'm currently the head of studio for Stupid Buddies, a LA stop motion studio that's moved up to Toronto. So that's what I'm doing now.
Thank you, Phil. Maral?
Thanks, Jelena. So I wanted to start from the genesis of the project, because the Big Reset is kind of a short series. And unlike most of the work we do at the Film Board, which is more kind of auteur artist driven, this was more of a commission. And it came about in the kind of after the initial shock of the lockdown here in Montreal, anyway, in Canada in mid-March, and after the kind of taking care of the crisis of just checking in with everybody and making sure the projects were kind of okay and that people were okay, we started to just ask ourselves the question of how can we be useful in these times, and it so happened that a couple of the executive producers also were having similar kind of thoughts, and so the project ended up being a coast-to-coast initiative of the Film Board to kind of capture the story of the pandemic, which was later called the Curve Project, Lockdown Stories. And so the Big Reset is part of a collection of mostly short films, mostly documentary, but some animated stories as well from across the country, different kinds of experiences. And for Jelena and I and Michael, it was sort of it was a very clear, we had like a really clear compass, I would say, at that time, and it felt very immediate, like we needed to offer up something that's fairly immediate, that embraced expertise and knowledge, that was about looking to the future, something useful and utilitarian, that was inspiring and aspirational, less to do with how did we get here and what are all the things we've done wrong, and more about what are the solutions and what do we do moving forward. And just, you know, how great animation is at that kind of communication, succinct, accessible, imaginative, that kind of thing. And we, you know, we kind of just nailed it into, we want to bring some expertise and talk to young people, sort of a youthful series that talks to the next generation. And we started to brainstorm the topics and the filmmakers, and fairly quickly honed in on what became the brief, which was that we wanted to make 3 or 4 shorts that dealt with big topics. At that time, we were looking at healthcare as the obvious first one, economics as the obvious second, and education and urban life. So that was sort of the original conceit for the 4 core themes. You know, in exploring who and how, you know, we discovered quickly that the crisis in healthcare was so huge that the people we wanted to talk to and interview, even if they were interested, they just weren't able to respond. They were just dealing with the health crisis. People like Dr. Esther Tailfeathers, 𝙧𝙚𝙘𝙧 Liu, who was the president of Doctors Without Borders at the time. And so during that early part of April, when we started to kind of also explore directors we want to work with, George Floyd's death took place, and the social justice movement was really front and center. And so it was obvious that we were going to talk about democracy, racial injustice, etc., and that kind of became the umbrella of governance. So that's how we ended up kind of shifting from health to justice in terms of how the films were conceived. And some shifts happened with David Suzuki's film From Education to Worldviews, which Jelena will talk about later. As far as the directors, I mean, yeah, I think we'll get to that as to why we made the choices we made. But really the core idea was, it was at the time where, you know, all the rainbows were in everybody's windows and everything will be okay was sort of everywhere. And the spirit of the series was, well, everything won't be okay unless we change. But to do that in a way that was going to be helpful and inspiring and kind of would galvanize people, especially younger people. So that was the framework. What we want to do is show you all the films. They're 3 minutes each. There are 4 of them. And then the way that we'll approach the discussion is we're going to go into each film with each director kind of in a more in-depth way and chronologically as well, because the series kind of evolved and kind of became more alive as the films were evolving, and we were learning as we were going through each project. And so the films started to influence each other. So we're going to kind of take you through that creative process and start by screening the films. Jelena, is there anything I should have said that you caught me that I didn't? Okay. So without further ado, I will just say these films were released in mid-September at the beginning of the school year. So they were made starting in end of May was when we started kind of discussing and development. And the production was sort of June, July, August, and they were launched in September. So Julie, I will pass it to you and enjoy.
Conventional economics knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing. The convention is to talk about growing a bigger economic pie. Who doesn't want more pie? But why would you settle for pie when you could have layer cake with icing on it? The fundamental layer of the cake has got to be how the planet is doing, because it's the source of all the raw materials. Then the next layer is how we take care of one another. And it's on top of those 2 things that you can build a physical infrastructure. And then on top of that is actually the economy that we usually talk about. none of which is possible without the previous layers. But we only ever talk about the top layer. The beginning of the 20th century starts with 2 wars and a depression. At the end of it, people recognized that human development and security was incredibly important for well-being. There was a really vigorous debate between, does human development create economic growth, or does economic growth facilitate human development? But around the beginning of the 1980s, the primary public policy has been growing the economy. You give the people that know how to create wealth more money so they can create more wealth for everybody. Yes, they created more wealth, but they kept more wealth. We were told that there was some kind of organic reason for it rather than greed, or the fact that wealthy people can change the rules, and they do. They shield themselves from risk, from financial risk, from social responsibilities, because they're too important to be permitted to fail, and everybody else pays for their failures. But when they succeed, they don't share it. An argument for free markets without also robust public provisions is an argument for inequality. Free market fundamentalists are blind to the other layers that support them. What we have really learned is that my survival depends on your survival. Building up the floor of supports will build up the economy. Better public services and paying people a living wage at the floor of the economy will boost the economy from the bottom up and make people more resilient for whatever happens to them, make them more willing to be innovative and entrepreneurial. None of that is possible in a pie. So why would you settle for pie when you could have cake?
A lot of people think of politics almost as this ideology. Why you seek the change in the first place is because it spoke to you personally. The personal for me is really political because you champion all the things you are. When there are communities that are not receiving anything at all, it's hard to be equal with nothing. We need to be equitable in how we distribute not only the wealth and the funding, but how we distribute the compassion. My mom, she has this really interesting quote, which is the finger by itself can't do anything, but the 5 fingers is what lifts the hand up. But when you create a sense of community and a sense of camaraderie, that's when you really start to create the most change. What are we choosing to invest in? What future are we choosing to put money into? Policing is overfunded. It's very ill thought out in terms of its training. They're not equipped to deal with mental health. Seeing armored officers is probably not doing anything to de-escalate the situation. We're paying the police more than we are paying our healthcare workers and our spiritual workers, which are healing our minds, they're healing our hearts, they're healing our traumas. When you go into a community saying, I want to heal versus I want to enforce, we're not putting a burden on our officers, but we're also creating more avenues of accountability and safety for the actual communities that we're serving. What's wrong with the education system? Well, the people who make the decisions think that they're doing this excellent job of being equitable, making sure all their kids have an equal education. Actually, no, as from my high school experience, the most challenging thing was feel like I didn't belong. They almost think like it's okay for them to tell you that, I don't need to teach you because you're gonna be a dropout and have 11 kids like your mom. And I said, first of all, she has 9. How can I separate the politics when I know I've been denied chances? But I know other people who look like me will be continued to be denied those chances until we change something. Financial equity doesn't exist. Education equity doesn't exist. Health equity doesn't exist. Who has the higher rates of diabetes and heart disease? It goes back to Black communities and the indigenous community in our country. Even as a Black Muslim woman, I have to always check my privilege because my Blackness doesn't automatically negate the fact that there's sexism in my community, and I have to fight for that as well. Every group has somebody that needs to champion them. In their stories lies a lot of solutions. The most powerful thing that people can do with their privilege is acknowledge it and use it to advance people who don't have privilege in the first place. Having authentic power is holding the microphone after making sure everybody had an equitable voice at the table. But whose table is it? Who's the table for? How long will I have a seat there? But when you say I built something from the ground up, like I built an arena, I don't need a table, I need an arena. Once we get everybody in and saying this is what I want to change, this is what I want to move, then you can actually say we've come to a consensus. We've come to a place where nobody feels vulnerable, nobody feels unsafe, and nobody feels oppressed.
I believe that we have to shift the way that we see our place in the world. We can invent a microscope that lets us discover a universe of life in a drop of water. We could build a telescope and see to the edge of the universe. We could escape the laws of gravity. Wow. We aren't like other creatures. We're so smart. The world is out there for us to use. But who the hell do we think we are, that we are the ones to set the rights of a bird, that we have the right to reshape a river that has flowed in that way for thousands of years? That is a shift from an ecocentric way of seeing the world to an anthropocentric, where we are going to get into trouble over and over again, because life has created the very things that we need as animals to survive. The most important thing that we all need is a breath of air. The air is in us and it's circulating to every part of our bodies. We call air spirit. When you expire, you lose spirit and you die. We are basically a big blob of water with enough organic thickener added so we don't dribble away on the floor. For most of human existence, we understood that we lived in this complex web of relationships. And our songs and dances and prayers all celebrated that. I believe that we have to rediscover ancient understandings. We have to learn our place, celebrate our place in the world, that we are a part of this amazing system. The world is just this marvelous place of discovery if children are given the chance to do it.
If you go up in an airplane and you look down, you will see lines inscribed on the earth everywhere. The entire world is now part of an urban system. Over the next 30 years or so, we're going to add a few billion people to the world, but we're also going to lose a few billion. The net result is that we'll add several billion people who don't know the stupid old ways. Things that we thought were permanent that are in fact open for reinvention. Probably the best example is the internal combustion engine, the continuous toxic explosion. People were like, what do you mean it's toxic? Yeah, it is. That's why it's outside. I mean, if you were in a room with it for 20 minutes, it would kill you. What a freeway really looks like is a river of fire, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Now, we've designed it so that you're not aware of that, but that is killing the planet. The 20th century was about us. How can we think about the welfare of humankind? The 21st century is, how can we think about the welfare of life? All life. We look at waste and we think, yeah, of course there's waste. Like, yeah, we're going to have garbage. No, actually, no. There can be no garbage involved. That's a concept that has permeated our mind like a virus. Here's the design challenge. Design a city without waste. Do it in perpetuity, where everything that is moving and flowing is designed as a continuous cycle. If I use the sun, the amount of energy I can use is effectively unlimited. If I make the transportation non-toxic, I can bring the transportation inside of my building. So imagine if the streets were all interior. Imagine if my car was an office, not a car. A place to take it easy and collaborate or sleep. I'm not driving a toxic explosion and I'm not waiting to get to work. When I talk about these kinds of things, people think, oh my God, he's out of his mind. But actually, we're already doing it. We're just not doing it enough. We build what we imagine. Technology catches up to imagination. If it looks familiar, it's not right. And I think this is where children come in, because children are the best agents of change. Once they see the logic, they can't understand why you would do it the stupid way.
So, hi again, everyone. Well, we hope you appreciated the film's experience. Before we dive into the creative process with each of the directors, I'd just like to tell you that you'll have the opportunity to ask questions in the Facebook chat, and then these questions will be transferred here to us and to the directors at 5 o'clock. I think that's our agenda. The idea is we will take a chronological approach in order to share the creative process with you. Because the way we deployed, at first Maral and I deployed as like looking for experts who to interview, and then also thinking at the same time about the directors for each of the subjects. So so we started, in fact, we first secured the participation of David Suzuki, and that's why the World Views film that you saw, the third in the lineup now, directed by Malcolm Sutherland, was the first to actually kick off the series production. And unfortunately, Malcolm, as I said earlier, is not able to be with us today here. Very last-minute emergency on an animation project. He's an illustrative director on. So all apologies on his behalf for that. So I'll kind of try to frame what our experience on that was. So basically, we succeeded after with help of some friends. We succeeded, and thanks to actually a Facebook post, finding a quick way to get to David Suzuki, and and he was enchanted by our ask, which back in the day was framed as a project about education. And if you were the minister of education for a day, what would be one big thing you'd do? And how can we talk to like youth and ministers alike and advocate for the environmental agenda to be the very basis for all academic curricula. And then, so 𝙬𝙧𝙧𝙬𝙧 was interested, and so he accepted to meet with us, with Malcolm and myself. And why we chose Malcolm was obviously for his amazing capacity to tell so much in a very limited time frame, like his Red Cross project that was a 11-second ode to a student protest against and against the police brutality back in the day during the student protests here in Quebec, and also for his, when I approached him, he said, wow, of course I would like to work with 𝙬𝙧𝙧𝙬𝙧. I was introduced to his work when I was very little. It was my grandfather who spoke to me about 𝙬𝙧𝙧𝙬𝙧. So of course it would be an honor. And I'm, you know, I've been in India, and all of my Zen or Buddhist approach to life, it would just be a great honor. So that said, we met with 𝙬𝙧𝙧𝙬𝙧 over Zoom, of course, and he was eager to hear us out and understand why we want him to speak about education. And then we ended up, because 𝙬𝙧𝙧𝙬𝙧 ended insisted on the fact that, you know, it's our approach to the world and how we actually shape our worldview that everything else depends on. And so by the end of our interview, our first pre-interview, it was clear that the film would be down the line, obviously very educative, but it would not be about how to reform the education system, but rather how to reform our view, our own view of the world, and move it away from anthropocentric towards ecocentric. And Malcolm was absolutely delighted by this interview, even though it was a hard one. Both that interview and then the real interview that was a 1.5 hour long interview that where 𝙬𝙧𝙧𝙬𝙧 told us that, yeah, probably you failed like as parents if your kids are spending so much time in front of the screens and so little time in nature and learning about everything that surrounds us, and that we are just one little particle within a bigger scheme of things of this planet. So it was a very intense interview for everyone, but obviously extremely enriching. So after that, I've done a short, a quick a transcript of the interview, and then we transferred that to Shifeng, who was the editor for all 4 projects. And the idea was to downsize that 1.5 hours of audio to 3 minutes. Well, obviously we went through phases of 15, 10, 5, and 3. And during that process, Malcolm wanted to be very hands-on already with the first downsize, rather than us handing him a 3-minute downsize, because his inspirational process was in fact going to include potentially elements from the interview that would be transformed into visual elements instead of being on screen, because the whole concept of the series was not necessarily to illustrate visually what the interviewees would give us as wisdom and expertise, but rather to augment them so that they would be together and not just in like a visual representation of what the speaker was talking about. So that was one of the challenges throughout the series and in this film as well. But I think it did help that Malcolm actually started with that 15-minute downsize. And then the creative process was, well, Malcolm, I forgot to say that Malcolm had, from the very beginning, he said, yes, I want to do this project, but I'm extremely limited with time. I only have 5 or 6 weeks for the animation. And that did influence, I think, even the approach to the film. We did have some design challenges because in fact it was like, at first the instinct was to really interpret what David Suzuki was saying by exploring this universe of youth and representing it by this the characters that are from that background. And then especially in the area where he speaks about the air and water, where we dip into more abstract elements or realms, it was there was some comments from our executive producer Michael Fukushima, who raised that up, said this is a great opportunity to actually go wild and speak about the we're just a blurb of water contained and so that was one of the moments where Malcolm was like, oh sure, of course, if that's amazing, if I can I will gladly go into abstraction. And one of the so it was basically Malcolm and Simon Cody did a little bit of several days or I think 2 weeks of animation as additional animation with Malcolm, and that's it. I'm I don't know, Maral, if you have any other ideas. This was supposed to be a conversation with Malcolm, so I'm kind of trying to channel Malcolm. It's not easy, so help me, please.
No, I think I was going to cut in and interview you, but you covered everything that you told me about while we were in production. So I mean, I'll just say that like Jelena and I work together often when it makes sense to, and so the series was sort of conceived together, and then we decided to, kind of play to our strengths and split the work up in this way. So Jelena took the lead on the World Views film with Malcolm, and with 𝙧𝙧𝙖𝙣𝙙 on governance, and I took the lead with Philip and Lillian on cities and economics. But we were, sharing notes and experiences and putting our heads together all the time. And that kind of helped to give some cohesion and harmony to the whole series. So no, I have nothing to add. You covered all the good stuff. And I mean, just that, anyway, so I think we'll go into cities now, because that was the next film in the production lineup. But Bruce Mao, who is the speaker we brought on board for it, was actually the first of our kind of so-called experts to say yes, which was hugely exciting for me because I'm a big fan of his. And Bruce Mao is a designer, author. He dabbles in architecture and urban planning and gallery installations. And it was his Massive Change project, which was an art installation and a book from, I think, early 2000s. That was a big inspiration for this series. A lot of the ideas about, you don't see how something is broke. You don't see the flaws until the system you've designed breaks, and then you see those design flaws, like those kinds of big ideas. And he's notoriously an idealist and inspiring. So we were really excited to work with him about the film, kind of looking at urban life, urban planning. We didn't know what it was going to be called, but at the time there was a lot of discussion about everyone's flocking to the country and leaving cities and etc. And so I decided to invite Lillian to do the project because she's such a strong designer. and she had done a film, a TED Ed film about honeybees that was really great. So Lillian, the first thing is, why did you say yes? What attracted you to the project?
Yeah, so when Maral emailed me out of the blue to say, hey, do you want to make a film with the film board? That was immediately something that I was really interested in, just collaborating with Maral and also creating something, doing a short project. It sounded like a really great opportunity in the middle of the pandemic. And then when she mentioned that it was with Bruce Mau, I was really amazed because I also was following a lot of Bruce's work in the aughts, in the early 2000s. And to think that we could be interviewing him and making a film with him was just an incredible opportunity. And I hadn't really followed what he had been doing more recently. So after Maral told me about that, I kind of just Googled his name, and like one of his latest projects was he was helping to redesign Mecca. And it's just incredible how his work is kind of extended into just really large planning projects. And even hearing, I think we were talking about what would be Bruce's views on cities. And I just had all these questions. Like, I just really wanted to know what his thoughts were on these ideas. And even that was just compelling, is trying to figure out what he would say about these things was an interesting question. So I said yes right away because it was something super interesting that I wanted to pursue.
Familiar in your world. Can you talk about the interview experience and the challenge of, honing in on the core edit of 3 minutes from the interview, the much longer interview?
For sure. So Maral and I talked a lot about even what our approach to interviewing Bruce. What were the questions? What were the things that we thought would be good to talk to him about? And I think we were both pretty nervous about doing even that pre-interview with him. But he was so enthusiastic. He had so many great ideas, and we debated recording the pre-interview so that we could even just, pull ideas from there as to what we wanted to ask him for the actual interview. And we didn't. And I remember after we hung up, it was like a great 1 or 2 hour call. We're like, oh my gosh, like we're gonna forget everything that he said. And we tried to kind of take notes and recreate some of that within the final interview. So it turned out well. I thought the interview was really effective, but it was, I think it was an hour and a half of, was it an hour and a half?
It was an hour. It was an hour,
Okay.
but it felt so rich that
Yeah.
it was. How did you get it down? Like, how did you balance the like all the richness of content and balancing, wanting to have his personality, sort of not cleaning all the rough edges. How did you do that? What was that process?
I think the steps were, Maral, you transcribed the entire 1 hour interview, and we poured over and highlighted the things that we really liked, which was difficult because it was almost the entire interview. We could make a film out of the whole thing. And we allowed Chi to cut that down to 8 minutes based on our highlighted notes. And that was really useful just to see what she saw not being part of the interview process, the things that she felt were most important to keep in the film. But I think with that, we were able to cut through that and say, no, we really wanted to keep in these particular moments. They were just memorable, very affable, parts of the conversation. And I think we went back and forth on the edit a million times within the course of a week, and we rejigged it several times and just tried to strip out everything and put stuff back in. The difficulty was trying to shape it into an arc that made sense, that wasn't just components of this interview, but kind of making a really cohesive thesis. And I think that the process was really effective for where we wanted to go, but it was a lot of cutting and resplicing, I think, to get it there.
So I'll just mention before we move to Philip and economics that this is a 2D, 3D hybrid, and you worked with a 3D animator named Omid Siraj.
Yes.
We can maybe talk about that during the Q&A component.
Sure.
So But thank you, Lillian. It was a lot of fun working on that film, and yeah, we could have made an hour-long piece with it. Philip, we're on to you, and we're going to be talking about economics. Am I right?
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes, Economics is the film that we did. It was 5 or 6 months ago. Maral called me up and said, hey, craziness, COVID craziness. And said that thing about like, how do you speak to kids about like this crazy world that we're in? And like, what happens when we come out of it? Like, how do we make the world better? Like we should like learn some lessons from this. And that's where it started. For me, it's always exciting when I've only worked with the NFB one other time, and it's always exciting when you're sort of working on these short films as a filmmaker, because it's very freeing. The mandate is pretty limited, and they allow you to sort of do the thing. They want to hire you to do the thing that you do. So I'm personally very interested in the idea of somebody explaining a complex thing. So like economics is perfect, and how do you show that didactically? Like that's really something that really interests me. So
actually
say about
yeah, well that's exactly it, because I really wanted to work with you on this, because you have this amazing talent to be sort of profound and absurd at the same time. And you know, it was sort of like the topic was serious, and at the time it was also, we were like in the beginnings of a financial catastrophe. And Armin was, you know, she was telling, she's an economist, and she actually had to reschedule the interview because she said, we're about to get our report, and you know, the results are potentially worse than in the Great Depression. So it was a scary time. It was a difficult topic. And yet you just sort of have this ability to understand that and bring it somewhere different. And when we came to you and said, we think this should be Lego, maybe. It was sort of, it was like, okay, it's an abstract topic. It would be interesting to pair it with a tangible technique. So it was like stop motion felt right. But it was you who kind of came back and said, no, I don't think Lego's right. How did you come up with your wooden blocks people?
I think because I kind of wanted it to be like something that you'd see in the 70s. And for some reason, I wanted to kind of strip out the timeliness of it. So having it be these, like the design concept was really like sort of like Swedish children's toys, like painted, you know, so like kind of along like Lego's Denmark. So it was kind of in the same ballpark as that. I just sort of feel like those characters or that world for me was just interesting. And then it was a way of sort of communicating again with like, wanted to kind of communicate with kids, wanted to kind of communicate with adults, kind of wanted to like wear the look and the feel of like an educational film that might have been from another sort of time period. I remember that we sort of zeroed in on, maybe I'll talk about the process. The process was like, we had sort of, things were written out for us, kind of like what the topics were generally going to cover. And so we started coming up with like concepts. And I remember we got the audio and it was fat. So it was like, if it's a 5-minute piece, I think it was 8 minutes or something like that. And then it was just a process of like, it was kind of nice for about 2 weeks, just going out to the park every day with the phone, with the audio recording and the sketchbook, and just sort of drawing out some thumbs. And then it was a case of sort of sending it off to the team and being like, what do you guys think about taking it in this direction or that direction? I always wanted to make it funny. And I wanted to have people be a part of it. So like this sort of a farcical element, this concept that we're all kind of powerless and these are big things that are happening to us. So just to give it a little bit of humor, because like you said, it was kind of a scary topic at the time. So what can you do but laugh? And I actually have a screen share here. I don't know how this, I don't know if I'm going to break some rules.
I think you would break the entire world, because we promised the Cinematheque we won't try to screen share because the technology is too risky. Describe it to us.
There is an excellent photo that Maral drug up from the bowels of the internet of a guy wearing red clogs, wearing just like Speedos, walking through what looks like a burning riot. Just like there's a car on fire and toilet paper in the background.
I have to see.
And we
Everyone's Googling it.
It's the title of it is if 2020 had an album cover. And it's just a guy who's basically naked with a football helmet walking through with these red clogs. And this was around the time when we sort of come up with the idea of like having red shoes represent, you know, human, the sort of commercialism and just a way of showing sort of like the modern commercial economy. And that was kind of the start of it. And then we started just coming up with ideas. The other thing that was kind of funny too is I realize now after that basically Armin's advice is like in a way playing with the concept of like let them eat cake, which I think is kind of fantastic, and I had never even thought of that as any sort of like visual. So
well, the conspiracy theorists out there did notice that, and so there's been a lot of very interesting comments on the YouTube channel about another rich lady who used cake as an analogy, but the cake analogy was actually kind of it was the starting point of Armin honing in on how to talk about this concept in a way that was tangible and that useful, because there's so much history around it. You know, she goes through a whole history of the 20th century. And the cake analogy was not hers. It was, I'm sorry, the name of the economist escapes me right now, but it's in the credits. So that's a model that comes from, that was sort of the basis of it. I'm gonna hand it over to Jelena because I feel like we're just skimming the surface with these films, but I think we'll cover all the projects. We're gonna talk to 𝙧𝙘𝙧 and then we'll come back to everybody with questions. So thanks, Phil. Over to you.
So, so quickly, yes, the idea was that Maral actually found both Munira and 𝙧𝙘𝙧 for this project. Munira, the powerful, eloquent, young criminologist and activist from Toronto, and 𝙧𝙘𝙧, his graphic novels, like we actually looked through the YouTube channel of someone going through Martin Luther King his graphic novel about Martin Luther King's life. And so obviously we fell in love with the characters and the style. So we reached out to him. And so tell us, 𝙧𝙘𝙧, why did you say yes?
My God, it was the NFB. How could I say no to the NFB? It was very strange. I woke up one morning, was going through my email as I usually do, and all of a sudden I saw NFB there, and it immediately struck me because I was taken right back to when I was a child. They would always show us NFB shorts during our lessons. It was a kind of a standard thing throughout the year. So I've had this connection, this sort of nostalgic connection with the NFB since I was a little kid. So it felt like kind of a no-brainer if you guys are reaching out to me for me to pick up the torch and you know, and go with it. Yeah, so I was really excited to do it. And for 1 second, I sort of considered saying no, because when I got your email, I continue to be kind of swamped with a bunch of projects that I'm trying to work my way through. And, you know, great when you have opportunities on the table, but sometimes you can do them a disservice if you say yes too many times. So I was very tempted to say no, but then, like I said, the NFB had meant so much to me growing up that there was no way I could have ever said no to this job.
And so our plan was not to have the subject in the films, but then you came up with this idea of Munira holding the microphone, and so could you tell us a little bit about that? How did you how that came up? How did you come up with that concept?
It was sort of it was just sort of there. It was like listening to her. She's such a kind of a forceful, dynamic speaker. She's got such a presence, even just through her words. I'm sure it's reinforced when you're actually in her presence, for real. It just seemed like we'd be doing ourselves a little bit of a disservice by not including her as a character in her own film, just because she was just such her presence lends so much weight to the ideas that she's trying to convey, that it just seemed like it was something that would be kind of a service to us in telling her story.
And then it became the whole metaphor, even sound design, everything is actually kind of revolving around that concept of, because the power is, holding the microphone and sharing that privilege. Exactly. Or representing the other. So that was a really good call. And what was the creative process in your view? Like there was could you speak a little bit about the crew and your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was really, I felt very at home doing this particular subject matter. I also would have felt at home doing the cities, because I'm a city person. I've always lived my life in cities. Economics wouldn't have been quite as good a fit for me. And worldview, I don't think would have been quite as good a fit for me. But governance really kind of hit home for me, just because government's something that is a great concern for me. It's something that affects all of us, regardless of whether we want to pay attention to it or not. It's still kind of affecting our day-to-day lives. So I feel like it's something that we at least need to have some understanding of who the players are and how it can affect us overall. So I felt very kind of comfortable. And also listening to Manero's ideas. I think a lot of people would paint her as kind of like a leftist or a progressive, when I feel like her ideas should just be common sense. Basically. So I felt very kind of connected to what her message was. So once I got the initial tape, very similar to what you said, Phil, about just going over it time and again and sketching. That was my process for the first little while. Just listening to her interview in all its stages, from its longest to its shortest. Just playing it over and over again, and then sketching ideas, turns of phrase would spark images, or just her energy overall would kind of spark images. The overall theme, like we said, of wanting people to have a voice and have a kind of an equal voice with those who are in power. All those themes kind of would continually spark images. So it was a kind of a process of listening to it, sketching, and then finally showing you guys what my initial ideas were, which was terrifying, because this is my first foray into animation. So I was kind of expecting more of a harsh critique about my lack of skills in this department, but I was really kind of relieved when you guys seemed somewhat enthused by what I put together. And then when I finally got to work with our two great collaborators, it was
Parisa Mohit and Bogdan Anifrani, who were the animation team.
Yes, they were fantastic, and they were so kind of welcoming into this process, and kind of nurturing in this process, as you and Maral were. And I sort of felt like even if I made a bad move, that you guys had my back and could steer the project in the right direction if I was steering it in the wrong direction. So it was a very comfortable and exciting collaborative process to be a part of.
Thank you. All right. We should also maybe mention that as you have seen, all the films have the signature bumper, intro and outro, and that design was done by Mackie Ottawa, a graphic designer based in Montreal. And the music was done by Martin Caesar, another Montreal-based artist, composer, music composer, so and musician. So that was a very important part of like setting the tone for the series, and also making a common denominator for all of them, all of the films. So what else? There was also sound designer Travis Mercredi was our sound designer, and he was working from Northwest Territories. So that was a beautiful remote experience that really turned out well despite despite the distance. So so maybe we could, I don't know, Marco, what about the questions? Would you like, do we have more time to discuss? I think that maybe Lillian had less time than the others because there was a little bit of
there was a
misunderstanding.
yeah, there was a misunderstanding, Lillian. I'm sorry. So you have still a few minutes with, I think you were with Maral.
Maral, exactly, yeah.
Great.
I apologize.
No problem. And
it was a
actually,
misunderstanding because anyway.
All good.
I think, I mean, my kid just showed up and was like, "Mommy, it's an emergency." And so I was like, "Lillian, we got to talk about what it was like for you to make," and I mean, I think this could also be for any of the directors afterwards who want to talk about this, but just the unique challenges of making this film. I mean, I think the people who are watching are probably much more familiar. I mean, everyone's familiar with this kind of life right now, but it was really, I felt it for you in a big way. So I wanted to ask you about that. And just like, what was it like to do this film? And you like, it was like a passion project for you in a way, and it was like right in the middle of your family. What was a typical day like? Who was in your space?
Yeah.
How did you make it?
For sure. So it was, I guess we started around when the lockdown really officially began. So I have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they both got pulled out of their school. So my son was doing online learning, and then my daughter's daycare was canceled. So, and my husband, he's a composer, so he also freelances from home. So basically we were in this crazy Groundhog Day cycle where everyone was just at home, in each other's faces, everything was chaotic. And then the only way to really make it work was my husband would watch them for the daytime, and I would watch them in the afternoons. Then we would put them to bed, and then that's when I would start working on cities. So I would work from 8 till like middle of the night, and then I would go to bed. I would in the morning sometimes take a nap, and then we would just repeat that cycle for, you know, probably 2 months, 2.5 months. And I'm an animator, so I am a night owl. It doesn't actually really bother me that much, but I've never really done it with 2 kids before. So that was definitely a really crazy time. And we got into a routine, and it kind of worked. But I don't think I'll say that I would necessarily repeat that again if I can help it.
And you had the added kind of complication, I guess, of it was technically the most complex of the 4 films, I would say. And Omid who was in Montreal, ended up moving to Vancouver during production, so there was a time zone difference too. But can you talk about first the 2D, 3D hybrid?
Sure. Yeah, it was, so a big shout out to Omid Siraj, because I found his work online. He actually had done a previous project with another really talented 2D designer, but he used her designs and then brought that into Cinema 4D to use 3D on top of it. So when I saw that, I was like, you know, this would be amazing to work with him to try to incorporate this 2D feeling with the 3D technology. And when we approached him, he was very nice and he was very interested, but he also said, "Oh, but by the way, I'm moving, like in July, I'm moving. I have plans to move to Vancouver." And we were like, "It's okay, we'll make it work." But really the hard part was on him, was the fact that he was literally trying to work on my project. He was also freelancing and working on his own stuff, and then picking up his entire family. And he has a 3-year-old as well, picking them up, moving them across the country. And half of the project, it was just spent with him in a room full of like cardboard boxes and like a table where he was just trying to, you know, get this project finished. So and then there was the time difference as well. So it was really, there was a lot of juggling involved for him more than me.
And the other thing, I'm kind of torn about what aspect of the like design work to talk about, but it felt like there was various different ways of taking the film when we were trying to cut it down and kind of finish it to the quality that we wanted to. And so there was a push and pull between kind of a 2D illustrator's view on it and a 3D animator's view on it. How did you navigate that? Like how, where did you end up landing? How did you make those decisions?
Yeah, it was definitely tough because especially with the time frame, I knew that, and because again, I couldn't work to full capacity with the 2 kids, I knew that I would really have to be relying on somebody else to execute my designs. And the original idea was that Omid would do all of the animation in Cinema 4D based off my designs, and he would plan it. But as we slowly started getting into the film, it became very clear that his time was limited, but also that the style of the film might not necessarily have lent to a full 3D look or a full 3D motion. And I think it was like we're just going to have to make this as we go and hope that it works. And I do animate as well. So I do work in motion. So I was creating these style frames and then animating them in After Effects to plan out how this would work. And it slowly evolved into just being part of the film. And so in the end, I think the marriage actually worked pretty well, but it was definitely an exploratory process.
So Marco, we could go to the Q&A from the audience, or we would happily keep asking questions. What would you prefer?
Thanks for this very, very exciting, fascinating discussion. We have really, really good comments on our Facebook chat, but no questions yet. So we're inviting everyone, if you have questions for the producers, for one of the artists, or for the complete gang, please go ahead, simply type your question on our Facebook, in our Facebook chat. But I had a question for Lillian. Lillian, I saw in the notes that you did a TED video. And tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems that this project is a little bit similar to the TED videos in a way, but I suppose also that it is very, very different. So Lillian, what was the difference on working on a TED video and on this specific project?
Yeah, I think that the TED was slightly simpler, only because they gave me a script and they said they were working with somebody talking about honeybees. And even still, we had to condense that script down. And, it ended up being about the same time, about 3 minutes. But with this cities piece, I had so much freedom to think about how I wanted to shape the interview and craft a new narrative based on a longer piece. So there were definitely similarities, and I was looking at that too, is how do you tell this in a really short amount of time and really make it feel like it's, like a beginning with a middle and an end. It definitely really informed what I was trying to do with the cities project. But I think this one definitely there was a lot more freedom. It wasn't just about instilling information. It was about kind of sharing a philosophy that Bruce was trying to get across within our talk with him.
My next question would be for 𝙏𝙧𝙖, Phil, and you. Did you have to argue with the philosophers and intellectuals? I mean, did someone say, no, this is not what I meant, I don't like what you did? Or could you maybe insist more a little bit on, you see what I mean? So did you have did you have to argue with the guests when making the film?
I never got to interview Munira, so I couldn't actually speak to that. That's more of a Maral and Jelena question regarding our film.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, sorry, just to clarify, for governance, it was slightly different, given that we did that as last of the project, and by the time we actually got to confirm 𝙏𝙧𝙖, the interview with Munira was already done. So we just proceeded, Maral and I alone interviewed both experts for economics and governance. Sorry, Phil.
I was just going to say, I mean, I don't think I received any notes from Armin about can you do this differently. really we're just there as a service to allow what the person is saying to be sort of more deeply understood. That there may have been some notes that we got from the NFB that might have sort of pushed us in different directions. So, but no, definitely not directly. No real back and forth from the speakers.
People at home, don't hesitate to send your questions. Maral, Jelena, go ahead if you have something in mind. People are shy.
I'm gonna let Jelena answer, or sorry, Lillian answer that about Bruce, because we were really nervous to show him the film. So you can tell that story.
Yeah, we were really freaked out because yeah, we didn't know in the middle, and then we actually had a big discussion about whether we would show him anything. So in the middle, we just showed him like just a little clip of a drawing, just to give him a peek, and he laughed when he saw it, and he said it was great. So that was like just enough to keep us going to say, I think we're in the right direction. But we showed him whenever it was finished and completed, and we were relieved because he really liked it. I think he really enjoyed it and shared it on his own channel. So we were thankful for that. Yeah.
The philosophers, as you call them, I like that you called them that, Matthew. That's better. The philosophers, when we did the interview and we debated whether, like, how long should we do the audio interview so that we're not just painting ourselves into a corner, but it felt like, because we were doing this remotely, we were like sending them a good microphone, we were trying to record it over this clean feed system that allows you to monitor, so we were trying to make sure the technical quality was good, at the same time as getting them in a certain headspace so that they're not talking to us as experts. Like, it's not a CBC style interview. We were sort of like, okay, now tell it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. Okay, now tell it to me like I'm in it's a commencement speech, and a high school graduation commencement speech. So we were trying to kind of coach them at the same time. So the interviews ended up being about an hour long. None of them were really longer, I don't think, but it was still a lot. So they left going, I don't know how you're going to make a 3-minute movie out of this. And we debated whether we should show anything in the middle of the process, and we decided not to. I don't think for any of the philosophers, we didn't go back to them until the final film, with the exception of Bruce, because he was really interested and he wanted to see. And when we did show them the final, like with Armin for economics, when we showed her the final film, she was just like flabbergasted. She was delighted and I think relieved because she was like, this is really serious, hard, heavy stuff. And she wanted it to be accessible and to appeal to the youth. Because I feel like the speakers, the subjects of the films really responded to the notion of that this was for younger people. And that came from Jelena, actually, when we were talking about like, who is this, like, what's the tone? She was like, it should be for young people. And so that became kind of a goal, and that got Suzuki to say yes, for sure, because he was at a stage in his, he's at a stage in his life where he just wasn't going to give his time to something if he didn't think it was worthwhile. And because it's for youth, he said yes. So, and he also was really, really happy with it. So we were just relieved and delighted to get those kinds of that response. And Munira was also just like, oh man. Awesome. She thought it was awesome. And yeah, I mean, we're going to be doing a different session. We'll talk about that at the end, but it's kind of a partnership between the Cinematheque and the Ottawa International Animation Festival. We're going to dive deeper on the cities and governance films, this time with the subjects there.
We have one question. Now the questions are like, it's like a Niagara. I mean, question from Emma Dupuis. What would be the best advice you could give to students in animation to keep navigating on those meaningful acts and intentions in the future? Thank you for those great productions.
That's cool.
What would be the advice for those like kind of activist films? Is that?
Yes. Yeah, we could understand the question like this.
I think the directors, I think you guys should you should answer this first.
Yeah.
You can, you can find topics that you enjoy and like. I know people who are making their own short films about subjects that they like, and being an animator is a very powerful thing. You can achieve whole worlds just by being a single person, and you can slow down time and adjust.
Phil, I think we lost your audio.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. He'll be back in a second.
𝙧𝙖, Lillian, maybe?
I feel like I'm so new to the game, and I'm still learning so much that I'm exactly the wrong person to ask that question.
I would just say that you should really be vocal about your passions. I think that especially nowadays with social media and people getting to know who you are as an artist, I think it's good to be true to the things that you feel passionate about and create work that revolves around that, because then when people say an organization does look for, an artist to work with them, they're going to look for people who are truly invested in those subject matters. So for me, I think obviously sometimes you just take work because it's also part of your job. But when you have the opportunity, I think be very focused on choosing the things that you're very passionate about, and it'll come through in your work, the things that drive you. And that's what I think organizations want. They want artists who are passionate.
Mm-hmm. Phil, I see that you're back now. Oops, you left again.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, we have another question from John Lewis. Are you considering using the other content from the interviews to make additional films? Maybe this question is more for the producers.
We haven't thought about making additional films, but we did decide to release the audio interviews kind of as a podcast. So they're available on SoundCloud. We're not like officially distributing them, but they're available as a link to a SoundCloud. And I love them. I think they're really, really, they capture a certain time that was really important, and it was really a sobering time. And you can hear that in the full interview. So they're really precious. Go out and make stuff with them. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but just did. Go and animate some aspect of the audio, and then maybe something will happen. I don't know. But no, we're not gonna be able to do that. We did the best we could with the resources we had. So.
Phil.
I don't know what the question is, but I definitely would like to thank, with the limited resources, the crew of people who made me able to make this short film. Nikki Woolsey was the art director who built all this stuff, and we did it all COVID compliant. And Martha Grant was the animator who came in and brought in a style and brought in a lot of thought to the movement. A very sort of limited, sort of that kept in tune with the actual visuals. So I would just like to say thanks to those guys.
Okay, it seems that we have no more questions. So Maral and Jelena, maybe we can go to the conclusion now.
Sure. Well, I would just add that the films exist in French versions with French subtitles and the French intro and outro, in the intro bumper and closing credits in French. On the NFB website, you just have to go to the French side, the ONF.ca. It wasn't easy to subtitle them, especially not Munira, with a pace that she spoke about all these important issues. But I think it is still a valid version to watch. And then Maral, we want to talk about the coffee break a bit more, or it is on February
4th. February 4th. Yes, which is 2 weeks from now. It's a Thursday. And
at noon, I think.
Yes, and it's part of a series that the Ottawa International Animation Festival launched, I think in November, kind of these noon hour coffee breaks. So it'll be hosted by them. But just, thanks to the Les Sommets and the Cinémathèque and Ottawa Festival for kind of joining forces on that, because this project was really special to us. I mean, it just felt really important to do something, and it was really fun to do, and it felt inspiring, and we were working with directors we love and directors we didn't know about, like 𝙏𝙧𝙖𝙣𝙀, it was so there's just like we appreciate having time to talk about them, and for these amazing organizations to co-host it as kind of a series, because we just wanted to be able to dive a little bit deeper. And so that's what we're planning on doing for the February 4th discussion. And as I said, the philosophers will be joining us, and they're going to be very fun to listen to. So thank you.
Yeah, if there's another minute, Marco,
Sure.
I just wanted to add, because we kind of just mentioned Parisa and Bogdan for as animators in the governance film, and I would just we never really touched on the creative process there. So in fact the idea was that 𝙏𝙧𝙧 was providing designs, storyboard, and I mean the framed and the designed elements, and then Parisa was bringing her magic of textures and After Effects and the moves, together with Bogdan, who was then some of the elements were animated by Bogdan and others by Parisa, but it was a really interesting dynamic and under the gun, like given the time frame that we had. So I just wanted to add this to the conversation.
A lot of sleepless nights involved in that project, that's for sure.
Did everybody who worked on these films work with a team of people, like a team of people to facilitate the animation?
Team is a big word, but yeah. Small team, yeah. Well, it was 𝙏𝙧𝙧, Parisa, and Bogdan. That was the team, aside from Travis and Martin, who were working on the sound and music. And Martin actually did music for each of the films as well. For Lillian, it was Lillian and Omid. And then we licensed some music from Lillian's husband, because it was like, whatever's happening, we'll put it in the film. So actually, John Poon is an amazing composer, and he did, we licensed something from him for Lillian's film. And Malcolm was just Malcolm and Simon, so it was just the two of them, and they had, because Malcolm was on such a tight time frame, it was like a month and a half really that he had.
And that's another thing that we could mention, that the idea with the music was in fact for Martin Caesar to compose the bumper intro and outro, but then also to have the elements or the variations to that theme in the films if the films were needing it. But obviously it was like wall-to-wall opinions, and so there was not really much place left for it. But the concept was to have that the soundscape inspired, in fact, by the music from the intro and outro.
We just received one question. We have time for a last one from Arna Selznick. It's for the artists. Did you work the storyboards up on paper or digitally? It sounds like the storyboard process was kind of organic, changing as it developed. Was that so? Who wants to go first?
I'll dive in. Yeah, in my case, I started initially doing them in a sketchbook, but then I quickly switched over to, just for expediency's sake, my iPad, which is what I did the keyframes on throughout the entire project. What was the other part of the question?
It sounds like the storyboard process was kind of organic, changing as it developed. Was that so?
Yeah, in our case, tons of ideas were generated that we discussed and then discarded for one reason or another. It was kind of fun to just be able to cycle through ideas quickly, just throw things out there. That worked, great. That didn't work, fantastic, on to the next. It's kind of an energizing, creative exercise, let's say.
Phil,
Exactly
maybe?
the same. Exactly the same. Yeah, it started off in the sketchbook, started off with sort of like, how do you thematically represent these particular antics? We were calling them antics, and things got kept and things got cut and things got added. And as you get closer and closer to adding more frames into your animatic, there's opportunities that arise and people see things that would be better and you add those in. And then at some point, you just make it.
Lillian?
Same, yeah. We started in sketchbook and then it just kind of grew and transformed from there. We were playing with some photography at one point. I think Maral and I were thinking of maybe using live action footage. And we tried that, threw that in there and saw if it worked or not. So it was definitely a changing process as we were going.
Yeah, I'll just add this interesting, Bruce Mao had mentioned how much he loves Arthur Lipsitt's Very Nice, Very Nice. And so we knew that like when we were going to introduce the city, that we wanted to use some of the layered archival footage as texture. So Lillian kind of composed the city that way, and then we thought we can continue that theme, but then it just didn't really belong. But that was sort of a central reference in the film.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, everyone. So the part 2 of this talk will be hosted by our friends at the Ottawa Animation Festival. The date is, you just said it,
February 4th.
February 4th at noon.
Eastern time.
Thanks a lot, Maral. Thanks a lot, Jelena. Many thanks to the artists, Lillian Chan, Phil Eddolls, and 𝙧𝙧𝙖𝙣. Sorry, 𝙧𝙧𝙗, I forgot your...
I'm gonna let it go this time.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks a lot, everyone. Well, thanks for this very interesting discussion.
Thank you so much.
Okay, goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Marco, for hosting us. Bye.
Bye.